First off, I want to thank you all for the amazing support you've shown to the podcast. We are bringing back summary of knowledge that was shared, and it has faded due to our busy life, now in just few minutes, so we can become better version of ourselves. Subscribe to quick podcast summaries for price of candy per month. To listen, it ain't not all. Here's a rundown on She Cheated on Me and That's Not All, featuring Dr. Aria by Stephen Bartlett. Stephen Bartlett has made a great decision in having Dr. Aria as his guest on this podcast, a world-renowned high-performance coach who has worked with accomplished athletes, actors, and many others.
Today, Dr. Aria is here to talk about something uncomfortable and unimaginable.
Dr. Aria had previously been on the podcast, and Stephen Bartlett had asked him very personal questions about monogamy, which he had never done before with any guest. Dr. Aria had laughed at the question, and Stephen Bartlett now realizes that it was a nervous belly laugh. After the podcast, Dr. Aria shared a story with Stephen Bartlett about what had happened 2 weeks earlier.
Dr. Aria's wife had picked him up from the train station, and instead of going to brunch, she had suggested going straight home. Dr. Aria had asked if everything was okay, and his wife had said that she needed to tell him something. Dr. Aria had sensed that something was wrong, and had asked if it was about their marriage. His wife had confirmed that it was, and had told him that she had been having an affair with a man from work, and was pregnant with his child. Dr. Aria had felt a sense of loss and overwhelming sadness, but in that moment, he had also heard a whisper within him that said, "All will be well." He had known that everything would be okay, and he would get through this difficult time. Dr. Aria attributes this sense of calmness and rationality to his years of Buddhist exploration and understanding the nature of life. He has developed the ability to view his life as if it's happening to someone else, which allows him to have perspective and not be defined by his thoughts and emotions.
Stephen Bartlett is amazed by Dr. Aria's calmness and rationality in the face of such a devastating situation.
Dr. Aria explains that he was not angry, but rather felt a deep sense of sadness and loss. He was concerned about his wife's well-being and did not want her to regret her actions. Dr. Aria believes that this sense of empathy and understanding is the path to enlightenment. He has developed the ability to hold his thoughts and emotions at arm's length, which allows him to analyze and understand them. Dr. Aria's process for moving through this difficult time was to focus on one moment at a time. He did not try to avoid or shun his emotions, but instead allowed himself to experience them. He cried every day for 3 months, but he was not defined by his pain. Dr. Aria believes that people often get caught in a counterproductive cycle by trying to avoid their emotions and focusing on the future. He reminds himself that he can only experience one moment at a time, and deals with each moment as it comes. In that instant, he felt a rush of emotions, but instead of trying to push them away or deny them, he chose to accept and welcome them. He let the emotions sit, and as a result, he cried a lot, especially in the early stages of his grief. The sadness was overwhelming, but he didn't try to escape it. As he navigated this difficult time, Dr. Aria developed a 2-step process to cope with his emotions. The first step was awareness and acceptance, which involved acknowledging and accepting his feelings without judgment. The second step was reminding himself of reality, which meant confronting the fact that his marriage was over and there was no going back. He wrote down reminders of what had happened, insights he had gained, and how he wanted to handle the process. These reminders became his guiding principles, helping him to stay grounded and focused. One of the reminders he wrote down was hold yourself to the highest standard. Choose actions that you can be proud of. This was especially important for Dr. Aria, as he wanted to maintain his personal integrity and not let his emotions consume him. He also wrote, "You don't need anything from her anymore," which helped him to let go of any feelings of attachment or ownership.
Stephen Bartlett shared a personal anecdote about a similar experience he had, where he felt like his ego was bruised after a breakup. He described it as feeling like terrorists had stormed the cockpit of a plane, and he had to fight to regain control.
Dr. Aria resonated with this analogy, sharing that he too had experienced intense anger and a desire for revenge. However, he was able to detach from his ego and recognize that his anger was not justified. Dr. Aria explained that his mind would often come up with brutal thoughts, including fantasies of torturing the man his wife had left him for. However, he didn't judge himself for these thoughts or feel like he was a bad person for having them. Instead, he recognized that his mind was simply trying to find a way to cope with the pain and discomfort in.
Stephen Bartlett pointed out that the mind is programmed to avoid discomfort, which is why we often procrastinate or try to escape difficult emotions. However, he didn't act on these thoughts or feel like he was a bad person for having them.
As Dr. Aria continued to process his emotions, he realized that he needed to find forgiveness. He wanted to forgive his wife and the man she had left him for, not for their sake, but for his own. He wanted to travel lightly, without the weight of anger or resentment holding him back. He started a process of forgiveness, saying out loud, "I forgive you." This process helped him to release the emotional baggage and move forward. However, forgiving the man his wife had left him for was more challenging. Dr. Aria didn't know him, and all he knew was that he had taken certain actions that had hurt him deeply. It was a difficult process, but ultimately, it helped him to heal and move forward. It was a year after hearing the news that his wife had been unfaithful, and he decided to try a new approach. For 5 or 6 weeks, he would go running and try to process his emotions. One day, while running, he said, "I forgive you," and felt nothing. It was a moment of profound forgiveness, and he realized that he had been holding on to the past for too long.
Stephen Bartlett noted that Dr. Aria's journey to forgiveness wasn't linear, and that it took time and effort to get to that point. He pointed out that people often think that their experience of rejection or deceit is uniquely bad because their process to recovery isn't linear and takes a long time.
However, Dr. Aria's story shows that this is a normal and natural part of the healing process. Dr. Aria agreed, saying that each person's journey is unique and that there will be peaks and troughs. He noted that his background as a psychologist and high-performance expert helped him to develop emotional resilience and cope with the challenges he faced. He also talked about the importance of developing a robust sense of self, one that is unshakable and immovable, yet still experiences life's emotions and challenges.
Stephen Bartlett asked Dr. Aria about the impact of his experience on his opinion of monogamy.
Dr. Aria said that it led him to question his deepest assumptions about monogamy, marriage, and lifelong relationships. He realized that there is a social script for relationships, and that it's based on assumptions that monogamy is natural and that marriage is a human universal. However, he noted that this script is not supported by evolutionary biology or history. Dr. Aria explained that humans are apes, and that our ancestors did not live in long-term monogamous relationships. In fact, casual sexuality was the norm for our prehistoric ancestors, and it was based on social patterns that reinforced egalitarian principles. It wasn't until the advent of agriculture and private property that monogamy became more common. He also talked about the history of marriage, which began as a diplomatic tool and later became tied to sacrament and religion. The modern-day marital vows were written by Thomas Cranmer, and divorce was rare until the Divorce Reform Act made it more accessible. Today, there has been a drop in marriages, and more people are opting to cohabit rather than get married. Dr. Aria's experience has informed his work with clients, particularly those dealing with relationship issues. He helps them to develop a stronger sense of self and to navigate the challenges of relationships. He believes that developing emotional resilience and a robust sense of self is essential for coping with life's challenges and making good decisions. The statistics are staggering, with divorce rates in England and Wales at 42% and 43% of American women reporting sexual dysfunction. The porn industry is booming, with sales reaching record highs year after year. Meanwhile, the church is grappling with its own sex scandals, with hundreds of Roman Catholic priests admitting to thousands of sex crimes. The conversation turns to the concept of monogamy and whether it's a realistic and feasible expectation in modern relationships. One participant shares their own struggles with the idea, admitting that they can imagine being in a relationship with one person for the rest of their life, but also being open to the possibility of having multiple sexual partners. However, when asked if they would want their partner to be with other people, they quickly respond with a resounding hell no. This double standard is a common theme in the conversation, with one participant citing a book that suggests men are programmed to seek faithfulness in their partners due to evolutionary concern. The book argues that men are wired to ensure their sperm is the one that fertilizes the egg, and that this drive is rooted in the desire to pass on their genes. On the other hand, women are said to be more focused on finding a partner who will provide for them and their offspring, rather than seeking multiple sexual partners. However, this traditional understanding of human sexuality is challenged by more recent research, which suggests that humans may have had multiple sexual partners in the past. A paper published in Science in 2015 found that what separated humans from other great apes was our social organization, and that we may have had a more fluid understanding of relationships and sex. The conversation also touches on the concept of enmeshment, where two people become too close and lose their individual identities. One participant shares their own experience of becoming more like their partner in their marriage, losing their sense of self and their wild child spirit. They reflect on how this can lead to a slow suffocation of desire and intimacy, and how it can be tempting to seek excitement and connection outside of the relationship. The conversation takes a brief detour to discuss the podcast's new sponsor, Huel, a nutritionally complete drink that one of the participants has been using for years. However, the conversation quickly returns to the topic at hand, with one participant sharing their own experience of losing their sense of self in their marriage and the temptation of seeking excitement and connection outside of the relationship. They reflect on how this can be a sign of a deeper issue, a disconnection from one's own desires and needs. The forbidden is often what sparks eroticism, and this can create a perpetual sense of longing. However, when two people are together constantly, the desire can start to dwindle. This is what happened in Dr. Aria's past relationship, where the constant presence of his partner led to a loss of desire.
Stephen Bartlett asked Dr. Aria if he regretted changing, and Dr. Aria admitted that he did. He wished he had stayed true to himself, as he believes that living in line with one's truth is what sets us free. He cited the example of a frog in boiling water, where the gradual change in temperature can be imperceptible, but ultimately destructive. In his relationship, the desire was the frog, and the constant presence of his partner was the heat that eventually killed it. The conversation then turned to the idea of monogamy and how it can be challenging to maintain desire in a long-term relationship. He wants to find a balance between being a good partner and staying true to himself. He believes that the traditional idea of marriage, where two people are together constantly, is not for him. Instead, he wants a relationship that allows for space and freedom, where both partners can maintain their individuality. He wants to find a partner who understands and respects his need for alone time and adventure. He recently got his motorbike license and bought a new bike, which represents his desire for freedom and adventure. He's excited to see what the future holds, and is committed to staying true to himself in his next relationship. He recalled how his last 3 relationships were with people living in another country, which worked for him because he could still have his bachelor lifestyle while also having a loving relationship. However, he acknowledged that having kids would be a game changer, and that it's essential to consider the impact of societal expectations on our choices.
Dr. Aria chimed in, saying that while it's true that children benefit from having a sensitive caregiver, there's no scientific evidence to suggest that parents must live together in the same house for their children to thrive. She emphasized that every family is unique, and what works for one family may not work for another. She encouraged people to think outside the box and consider alternative arrangements that prioritize the emotional needs of all family members.
Stephen and Dr. Aria also discussed how societal expectations can lead to misery and unhappiness. Stephen shared his own experience of dropping out of university and starting a business, which was a decision that went against the conventional script. He emphasized the importance of questioning the status quo and being fearless in pursuing one's passions.
Dr. Aria agreed, saying that people often get stuck in conventional thinking and fail to consider alternative solutions that might bring them greater happiness. The conversation turned to the topic of marriage and how it's often seen as a key to happiness. Dr. Aria pointed out that people often get married without truly understanding what they want from the relationship. She encouraged people to dig deeper and identify their emotional needs, rather than simply following societal expectations.
Stephen agreed, saying that people often get married because they've been told it's what they're supposed to do, rather than because they've truly thought about what they want. She reflected on how life is full of uncertainties and that we never know what's going to happen next. She encouraged people to stay grateful for what they have and to trust that the universe is unfolding as it should. Stephen thanked Dr. Aria for sharing her insights and experiences, saying that it would undoubtedly help many people who listen to the podcast.
He encouraged people to reach out to Dr. Aria for coaching and support, and she shared her contact information, including her Instagram handle and website. Dr. Aria offers one-to-one coaching services, which involve identifying critical areas in a person's life and helping them develop the psychology and mindset to work through challenges. Her services cover a range of topics, including emotional resilience, sustainable weight loss, relationships, and entrepreneurship. Whether it's fears, loss of intimacy, imposter syndrome, or any other challenge, she assesses whether it can be addressed through a shift in mindset, leveraging her expertise to empower individuals on their journey. This enables them to develop a robust sense of self, adapt to changes, and continue growing.
Stephen Bartlett and Dr. Aria have a strong connection, even outside of the podcast. They recently met up and had an open conversation about various aspects of life. Stephen expressed his appreciation for their conversations, acknowledging that they're rich and insightful.
He asked Dr. Aria if there were any topics they hadn't covered that she thinks are relevant to their relationship or that she's learned from their conversations. Dr. Aria is confident that there's still more to explore in their conversation, implying that they'll likely have another episode in the future.
Stephen thanked Dr. Aria for her time, acknowledging the value she's brought to the podcast. He expressed his gratitude for her selflessness, recognizing that her contributions will have a profound impact on listeners. He emphasized that this is why he does the podcast, to learn, grow, and share valuable insights with others. Dr. Aria reciprocated the appreciation, thanking Stephen for the opportunity. Thank you for tuning in. Please click follow button, and just remember, subscription is only $1 per month. Leave a comment or review. Until next time, happy listening.